Do you know what it sounds like when a whole room laughs at you and calls it grace before a meal? I do. For 9 Thanksgivings, my wife's father sat me in the hallway at the children's folding table and made me carve the turkey I wasn't allowed to eat, and every year he raised his glass and called me the help. What he forgot is that I was also the one he handed the recorder to. Every toast, every promise, every door he closed thinking I'd cleared the room. I kept all of it. This year, before he finished the toast, a dead man's voice came out of my phone, and the date on it matched a signature he swore he never wrote. My name is Daniel, and I want to tell you about the brother nobody at that table knew I had. I should tell you how the table worked, because the table is the whole story. The Whitman house has a dining room long enough to seat 14, and at the head of it, every holiday, sat Gerald Whitman. 66 years old, silver at the temples, a man who shook your hand like he was deciding whether to keep it. My wife Claire grew up at that table. Her brother Trevor grew up at that table. I married 9 years ago, and from the first Thanksgiving I was set somewhere else. There is a hallway between the dining room and the kitchen. It is narrow, and it holds a coat rack and a child's folding table. The kind with the dented metal legs that fold flat, the laminate top worn pale where small hands have scraped it. That was my seat. The first year I thought it was a mistake. I carried my plate toward the long table, and Gerald looked up at me, not unkindly, the way you'd look at a dog that had wandered into the dining room, and he tipped his head toward the hallway.
The help sits out there, son, by the kitchen, where you can be useful.
I stood there with the plate in my hands. I was new and in love, and I thought maybe I'd misheard. I said, "I can pull up a chair, it's no trouble." He smiled at me like I'd told a small joke.
It's no trouble for you to sit where I put you either. Go on.
He called everyone son when he wanted to put them in their place. I was 37 this year. I have been called son by exactly 2 men in my life, and only one of them ever meant it, and that one is dead now. We'll get to him. It was never loud. That is the part people miss. The Whitmans did it under the candlelight, in the warm gravy smell, with everyone smiling, and if you flinched, they'd say you were sensitive. The first year I told myself it was temporary. By the 9th, I knew the exact give of those metal legs when I set my elbows down. Here is how a Whitman Thanksgiving went. The family ate in the dining room. I carved. There was always a moment, when the candles were lit, when Gerald would lift the big knife off the sideboard and hold it out to me handle first, across the threshold, so I'd have to step out of the hallway to take it.
Daniel does the bird. He's good with his hands. Aren't you, Daniel?
It was not a question, so I did not answer it. The first year I said, "Happy to help." The second year I said, "Sure, Gerald." By the third, I'd learned that anything I said got used, so I learned to say nothing and carve. I carved the turkey at a side counter, plated it, carried the plates down the long table, refilled the wine, cleared the bones, and went back to the hallway and ate whatever was left after the family had served themselves. Some years that was a good plate. Some years it was the neck and the skin and a cold scoop of stuffing. I learned not to look at which. And every year before the meal, Gerald handed me the recorder. That part I should explain, because it matters more than anything else I will tell you, and because at the time it felt like just one more chore. The Whitmans liked their toasts recorded. Gerald fancied himself a man whose words should be kept. There was an old handheld recorder, black, the size of a candy bar, that lived in a drawer in the sideboard, and every holiday somebody had to run it. That somebody was me.
Go fetch the camera, Daniel. Get the toast. You're good at standing in the back.
So I stood in the back, held the recorder up while Gerald raised his glass, and caught every word. Here is the thing about the man holding the recorder. You become furniture. People forget you are there. They say things in front of you they would never say to your face, because to them you are not a face. You are a hand holding a black plastic box, and the box does not have feelings, and neither, they decided, did the hand. I kept all of it. Not as a plan in those early years. I kept it because nobody ever asked for it back. Every Thanksgiving, I'd stop the recording and carry the device back to the sideboard drawer, and nobody ever once checked whether the files were there or gone. One year, I asked Gerald if he wanted me to send him the toast. He waved me off.
What do I need it for? I was there. Just keep the thing charged for next time.
So I kept the thing charged, and I started copying the files to my phone before I put the recorder back, and I told myself it was sentimental. I did not have a word yet for what it really was. The word came later, and it came from a court. This year, the 9th year, the year everything broke, started exactly like the 8 before it. Claire and I drove up the night before. Claire is Gerald's daughter, and I need you to hold 2 things about her at once, because both are true. She loved me, and she had spent 9 years explaining her father to me in the car on the way home.
That's just how Dad is, Danny. He doesn't mean it the way it sounds. He's from a different time.
I said, a different time. He's 66, not 100.
You know what I mean. He's hard on everybody. He was hard on Trevor, too, growing up.
I said, Trevor sits at the table, Claire.
That's different, and you know it. He's going to be better this year. He's been hard since Pop passed. Just give him this one, please.
I said, I give him everyone, Claire. 9 of them.
Danny.
I said, I'm not going to fight your father at his own table. I never have. I just want you to hear the words coming out of your own mouth on the drive up. He doesn't mean it the way it sounds. He's from a different time. He's hard on everybody. You've got a sentence for every single thing he does. She didn't have an answer for that, so she put her hand on my knee and looked out the windshield, and I let it go, the way I always let it go. It seemed like a small thing to give her, letting her keep her father gentle in her own head. I did not understand yet that the gentleness she protected was the same gentleness that would, this year, reach for a person who could not protect himself. Let me put you in the house. We arrived Thanksgiving morning. The house smelled like sage and wood smoke and the floor polish Gerald's housekeeper used, a smell I will associate until I die with being made small. Trevor was already there. Trevor is Claire's younger brother, 34, the golden son, the one who never had to carve anything. He met us at the door with a phone already in his hand, filming, because Trevor filmed everything that year. He had decided he was funny.
And here comes the help. Right on time. Put your bags in the mudroom, Danny. You know where it is.
I said, Morning, Trevor.
He says morning. Get that. He's so polite. Hey, you parking the cars later? People are going to start showing up around 4.
I said, Sure, whatever you need. Claire squeezed my arm, which was her way of apologizing for things she would not say out loud, and we went in. For a couple of hours it was ordinary. The relatives arrived. There were cousins I half knew, an uncle who talked about the market, the neighbors the Whitmans always invited so the table would look fuller. I was handed the recorder around 2 o'clock, the way I always was, Gerald pressing it into my palm like a tip.
You know the drill. Get the toast clean this year. Last year, you cut off the end.
I said, It ran the whole time last year, Gerald. I can send it to you if you want to check.
I don't want you sending me anything. Don't argue with me about my own toast. Just hold the thing up, keep your mouth shut, and get it clean. You can manage that.
I said, I'll get it clean.
Good man. See, you're useful when you don't talk.
I had not cut off the end last year. The recorder had run the whole time. But it was easier to agree, because at the Whitman table being right was a luxury I could not afford. I slid the recorder into my shirt pocket and went to do the bird. Notice what he told me, in his own words. Keep my mouth shut and hold the recorder up. He gave me the instrument and the silence in the same breath every single year. I want to set one more place at this table before the toast, because without him none of the rest makes sense. Walter Whitman. Everyone called him Pop. He was Gerald's father, Claire's grandfather, 80-something, and for the 8 Thanksgivings I'd known him, he was the only person in that house who treated me like I had a name. Pop was not at the table this year. Pop had died in the spring. And I think a part of why this Thanksgiving went the way it did was that the one man who might have stopped it was gone, and Gerald knew it, and Gerald had been waiting. But while Pop was alive, let me give you him because he is the warm thing in a cold story. Pop was a big, slow man who'd built a fencing business with his hands and never lost the calluses. At my first Thanksgiving, when Gerald sent me to the hallway, Pop got up from the long table with everyone watching, carried his own plate down the hall, and sat across from me at the folding table. He unfolded a paper napkin onto his knee like it was the head seat at a banquet. Pop. This where they put the good company? Good. I was tired of the noise. I said, "You don't have to sit back here, Pop. There's room up front." He looked at me like I'd said something funny. Pop. I don't do anything I don't have to. Eat your dinner, Daniel. You carved it. You ought to taste it. He ate with me at that folding table every year after, when his legs let him. He talked to me about fences, about wood. He never lectured. He was the only one who ever asked me a real question and waited for the answer. The first time he called me son, I had to look at the wall for a second so I wouldn't embarrass myself. He saw me do it. He pretended he hadn't. Pop knew about Eli. He was the only one in that family who did, and that is its own piece of this, and I'll come to it. For now, hold this. There was one believer at that table, and his seat was the folding table in the hallway, with me. He was dead now, and the people who weren't sorry he was dead were the ones about to raise a glass. I carved the bird, plated it, carried the plates, the way I'd done it 8 times before, the recorder running in my shirt pocket the way it always ran. I thought this year would be like the others, a wound I was used to, a thing I'd drive home from while Claire told me Dad didn't mean it. I was wrong. This was the year the wound stopped being old. The candles were lit. The room was full and warm, and a little drunk. Gerald stood and tapped his glass with a fork, and the room went quiet for him the way it always did. He looked down the table at his real family and then at me, standing in the hallway mouth with a half-cleared plate of bones in my hands, and he smiled.
Before we eat, I want to say a few things. It's been a hard year. We lost my father this spring.
A murmur. Somebody said Pop's name softly. Gerald let it sit, the way he let everything sit, and then he lifted his glass higher.
Pop built this family, and a family is blood. It's the people at this table, the real family, the ones who belong here. Not everybody at a table belongs at it. Some people marry in. Some people are just passing through.
He was not looking at the neighbors when he said it. The whole room knew where he was looking. The old heat came up my neck, the one I had learned to keep off my face. I kept clearing the plate, eyes down. And Trevor, 3 seats from his father, lifted his phone and pointed it at me, grinning, narrating under his breath for whatever audience he imagined he had.
Wait, get the help's face for this part. Don't move, Danny. This is gold.
A few people laughed. Not everyone. 2 cousins looked at their plates. The uncle who talks about the market suddenly found his wine glass very interesting. They were not cruel, those quiet ones. They were afraid of Gerald, and they let his silence sit, and the silence finished what the laugh started. I have stopped being angry at the ones who looked at their plates, mostly. It was one of the neighbor wives who did the small thing that stayed with me longest, and she did not even mean it as a knife. She leaned to the woman beside her, not bothering to lower her voice much, the way you don't bother when you've decided a person isn't in the room with you, and she said it as a plain fact, the way you'd name the caterer. Neighbor. That's the one who married the daughter. He came with the house, I think. They keep him for the carving. The woman next to her nodded, like that explained me, and went back to her wine. He came with the house. They keep him for the carving. Gerald was 4 feet away. He heard it. I watched him hear it. And he did not correct her, because she had only said out loud the thing his whole table arranged itself around. A stranger had just told another stranger what I was, in my own hearing, and been right by the only rule that table ran on. That was the second the room stopped being people who hadn't met me and became people who already knew exactly who I was. Gerald turned back to the table and raised his glass the last inch.
So here's to Pop, and here's to keeping what's his in the family, handled within the family the way he'd want. No outsiders, no lawyers, no charity cases with their hands out. To the boy who married up and never belonged.
He paused, and then he looked straight at me across the whole length of the room.
Daniel, clear the real family's plates, would you? And then you can go sit at your table.
There it was. To the boy who married up and never belonged. 9 years and I still felt it land. My ears rang. My hands wanted to set the plate down hard. I looked at Claire, and she was looking at her father with an expression I could not read. And here is the small thing I have never forgotten, because it was the first crack, and I did not know yet that it was a crack. Her chair scraped. An inch, maybe 2. She had started to stand, her mouth open on the front of a word, my wife rising at her father's table to say something into that laugh. Then Gerald's eyes moved off me and rested on her, and she sat back down without the word and smoothed her napkin like the chair had moved on its own. And that, the inch she rose and the inch she sank back, hurt worse than anything Gerald said, because it told me she had felt it too, and had been taught what felt people do at that table, which is nothing. She made it right later. I'll get to that. But in that second she sat back down, and I stood alone in the mouth of the hallway holding a plate of bones, and the room laughed, and Trevor got my face. And then Gerald said the part that changed it from an old wound into a war.
And while we're at it, let's not pretend the brother counts either. Whatever Pop scribbled about that boy, blood is blood. He isn't family here. Neither of them is. Pop's estate gets handled the right way. By us.
And Trevor, still filming, still grinning, leaned toward his father and said it loud enough for the room.
The brother. That's the special one, right? The one Pop got all soft about. Danny, your brother gonna come carve next year, give you a hand?
A couple of the cousins laughed at that. Gerald did not laugh. Gerald looked at me to see if I would break, the way he'd looked at me for 9 years across that threshold. I did not break. I held the plate of bones, and I looked back at him. And I think for the first time in 9 years, he did not like what he saw on my face, because something flickered in his, and he covered it by lifting his glass to the room.
To family, the real kind.
The brother. Now I have to tell you about Eli, because Gerald just put him in front of 40 people who'd never heard his name and used him as a punchline. And that is the moment the cold thing in me went still and clear. Eli is my younger brother. He is 31. He was born with a condition that means he has needed care his whole life and always will. And he is the gentlest person I have ever known. So in 9 years, I never brought Eli to that table. The Whitmans knew there was a brother, the way you know a fact off a form. They did not know I drive 90 minutes every other weekend to sit with him, or that he likes the same 3 songs and laughs at the same part every time. They did not know that whatever marrying into that family cost me, I'd decided early it would not cost him. I had brought Eli to that house exactly once, the second year, because Pop asked to meet him. They sat on the back porch for 3 hours, and Pop showed him how a hinge works. Eli, who does not warm to new people, held Pop's hand when we left and did not want to let go. In the car home, Eli said the same thing 4 times, the way he does when something is good. Eli. Pop has good hands. Pop's coming back. Can Pop come back? I said, yeah, buddy. Pop's coming back. I keep that promise in a worse place now than I'd like. After that afternoon, every time I saw Pop, he asked about Eli by name, and he remembered the songs. The last time I saw Pop alive, in the spring, in a quiet room I will not describe out of respect for him, he asked me to make sure Eli was looked after. Pop, you see to your brother. I've seen to my part. You'll understand when the time comes. Just promise me you keep what I gave you safe, and you don't let Gerald talk you out of it. I promised. I did not fully understand yet what I was promising to keep. I do now. So when Gerald stood at the head of his table and said the brother isn't family here and Pop's estate gets handled the right way by us, He was doing more than insulting me. He was reaching for something Pop had set aside for Eli. I did not know the shape of it yet. I knew the temperature, and the temperature told me everything. I set the plate of bones down on the folding table, quietly. I did not slam it. People ask me since why I didn't walk out of that house. If a room laughed at you and called it grace, would you have set the tray down and stayed or walked out? For 9 years, my answer had been, stay, swallow it, drive home, let Claire keep her father gentle. This year it changed, and not out of pride. Pride would have walked. It was Eli. You do not walk away from the table where men are deciding to take from the one person who cannot stop them. You sit down at it, even if your seat is a folding table in the hallway, and you wait, and you keep everything. I went and sat at the folding table. The recorder was still in my shirt pocket. It was still running. It had been running through the whole toast, the way it ran through every toast, because Gerald had handed it to me himself 2 hours earlier and told me to get it clean. I got it clean. Down the hall, the room moved on. Forks resumed. Gerald sat back down at the head of the table, satisfied. Trevor was showing his phone to the cousin next to him, replaying my face. And I sat in the hallway with a cold plate, the way I had for 9 years, and for the first time, I did not feel small. That seat had made me feel small for 9 years. This year, sitting there, I felt like the only person in the house who knew where everything was kept. Because here is what Gerald forgot, the way he forgot it every year. He thought the recorder was a leash. He handed it to the help to keep the help busy and out of the family's eye line, and never once thought about what the help could hear from the back. He had just announced in his own voice, with the date stamped the instant he spoke it, that Pop's estate would be handled within the family, no lawyers, that the brother didn't count. He said it to humiliate me. He said it into my pocket. The easy version of this story is that I sat there and hatched a plan. That is not what happened. What happened was simpler and colder. I made a list of what I had. 9 years of recordings, photographs of papers left out on the kitchen counter because the Whitmans left things out. They never imagined the help read. Text threads I'd been added to and forgotten on. And a sealed thing Pop handed me in the spring with my name on it in his own hand that I'd kept in a drawer for 7 months and never opened, because opening it felt like admitting he was really gone. I had a dead man's voice in my drawer, and I had not listened. I did not have a plan. I had an inventory, and now I had a reason to open the drawer. Claire found me in the hallway after the plates were cleared. The party had moved to the living room for pie. She crouched down by the folding table, in her good dress, on the worn laminate floor, and she looked at me, and I watched her try to find the sentence that would make it small again.
Danny, he'd been drinking. The thing about Eli, that was too far. I'll talk to him, but you know how he gets at the head of the table, he doesn't.
I said, "He doesn't what, Claire?"
He doesn't think before he.
I said, "He thought about Eli. He's never met Eli. He brought up my brother by hand in front of 40 people he's never met. That's not a man who didn't think. That's a man who planned a sentence."
He doesn't even know Eli, Danny. How would he?
I said, "That's my point. He knows there's a brother. He knows Pop loved him. And the night Pop's estate comes up, your father stands at the head of the table and tells a room of strangers that my brother isn't blood and the money stays in the family. Put those 2 sentences next to each other, Claire. Just hold them next to each other for 1 second. She held them. I watched her hold them. For 1 second, I saw the excuse crack a hair, and then she pulled back from it, because the version of her father where those 2 sentences meant something together was a version she could not live in yet.
You're reading into it. He talks like that about everybody's money. It's just how he.
I said, "It's just how he is, I know." She stopped on her own, halfway through the old excuse, and looked at me like she was seeing me at that folding table for the first time instead of the 9th.
You're not saying anything else. You always say something. You always argue and then you let it go. Danny, what's wrong with your face?
I told her, "Nothing's wrong with my face. I'm fine. And I was. That was the strange part. I was not shaking. I was the calmest I had been in 9 years at that table, and the calm scared her more than anger would have. Because anger she could talk down. Anger fit the story where Dad doesn't mean it. The calm did not fit any story she had.
Please don't do anything. Whatever you're thinking, please. He's my father.
I said, "He's your father. I know that better than anyone. I've been at his table 9 years and he still doesn't know I have a name."
Don't. Don't make this the night it all breaks. We can fix it. I'll make him apologize. A real one. I'll make him say it to your face. Just promise me, Danny. Promise me you'll let it go like you always do.
I said, "I heard you, Claire." Notice that. She asked me to promise I wouldn't do anything, and I did not promise. I held her hand at the folding table, the way Pop used to sit across from me there, and I let her think the silence was agreement. It wasn't. I had made a different promise in the spring, to a different person, and that promise had a higher claim. We drove home that night, late, the heater ticking, the highway empty. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then, somewhere past the first exit, Claire said it quietly, to the window, not to me.
He's going to call you tomorrow. He always calls the day after. He'll act like nothing happened and ask if we got home okay, and you'll be polite, and it'll go back to normal. It always goes back to normal.
I said, "Is that what you want, for it to go back to normal?"
I want my husband and my father in the same room without me feeling sick. That's all I've ever wanted. 9 years.
I said, "I know." And I almost told her, right there in the dark, about the envelope. I had it on the tip of my tongue. But I remembered Pop's note, "Don't let Gerald talk you out of it." And I understood that the way Gerald would talk me out of it was not by talking to me at all. It was through her, through the person I loved, asking me to let it go like I always do. So I said nothing. Claire fell asleep against the window past the second exit, and I drove in the dark with the recorder a small, hard weight in my pocket, and I knew that when I walked in the door, I was going to open the drawer. I carried Claire's coat in. I put the kettle on out of habit and forgot it. And then I went to the bedroom, to the bottom drawer of my dresser, under the folded shirts I never wear, and I took out the thing Pop gave me in the spring. It was a padded envelope, taped shut, heavier than it looked. On the front, in pen, in Pop's slow, careful hand, the hand of a man who'd held tools his whole life and wrote like every letter cost him something, it said, "For Daniel, not for them. Open it when you finally have to." I had finally had to. I sat on the edge of the bed with the envelope on my knees, and I listened to make sure Claire was asleep, and then I worked a finger under the tape. Inside, there were 2 things. There was a folded letter, several pages, in Pop's hand, with 2 other signatures at the bottom that weren't his, witnesses, I'd learn, though I didn't know the word for it yet. And there was a small voice recorder, not the family's black one, a different one, with a sticky note on it in the same careful hand. The note said, "Play this first, then call the number on the letter. Don't let Gerald talk you out of it. I'm sorry I left you with this, son." Son. I sat on the edge of the bed with my dead believer's voice in my hand and his word for me in my eyes, and I did not press play. Not that night. I held it, and I read the note again, and I understood 2 things at once, and both changed the shape of the room. The first was that Pop had known. Whatever Gerald had announced at the head of the table tonight, handled within the family, the brother doesn't count, no lawyers, Pop had known it was coming, before he died, and had set something against it, and put it in my hands instead of his own son's, and told me not to let Gerald talk me out of it. He had named the danger by naming the man. And the second thing, the colder thing I sat with until the window went gray, a number on that letter to call, and next to it, in Pop's hand, a name I did not yet know. A name that did not belong to the family, that they would later try to wave away as Pop's lawyer. Pop had left me more than his voice. He had left me a door, and a person on the other side of it waiting for me to knock. I put the recorder and the letter back in the envelope. I told myself I didn't press play because I was tired, and that was a lie. The truth was that the second I pressed play, I would not be the help anymore. I would be something the Whitmans did not have a name for yet. And once I knew what was on it, I could not unknow it. So I held it one more night. And in the morning, before Claire was even up, the phone rang. It was Gerald. Claire had told me he always called the day after, and she was right. I almost didn't answer. I'm glad I did because of what he said.
Daniel, you get home all right? Roads weren't bad?
I said, we got home fine.
Good, good. Listen, about last night. You know how it is, a man's had a couple, the toast runs away from him. No hard feelings, I hope. Family's family.
I said, you brought up my brother, Gerald.
I brought up the estate, is what I brought up. Which is the other thing I'm calling about. Pop's affairs, it's a mess, paperwork everywhere. And the last thing any of us needs is some lawyer in there taking a third of it to tell us what we already know. So I'm going to handle it. Keep it in the family. Quiet. I'll have you and Claire sign a couple of things, just to keep it simple, and nobody has to pay a stranger. We clear?
There it was. Keep it in the family. No lawyers. Sign a couple of things. The same words he'd put into my pocket the night before, except now gently, like a favor. And standing in my own kitchen, I understood he had no idea Pop had left me anything at all. He thought I was the help. He thought the help would sign. I said, sure, Gerald, keep it simple.
Good man. See, that's the Daniel I like. We'll talk soon.
He hung up pleased with me. I took the envelope and the family's black recorder out to the car, set them on the passenger seat, sat in the cold driveway with the engine off, and I called the number Pop left. A woman answered on the second ring, like she'd been expecting the call for 7 months. I told her I was Daniel Hayes, that Walter Whitman had left me a letter with her number on it, and that I didn't really know why I was calling. She did not sound surprised. She said her own name back to me, the name written on the letter, and spoke before I'd even finished.
What hope do you have against me? Mr. Hayes, I've been waiting for you to call for 7 months. Your grandfather-in-law left instructions that I was not to contact you, that you had to come to me when you were ready. So I'll ask you one thing first. Have you listened to the recording he gave you yet?
I said, no, not yet. I opened the envelope last night. I haven't pressed play.
Good, don't. Not in the car and not alone.
I said, why not?
What hope do you have against me? Because when you hear it, you are going to want to do something fast, and fast is exactly what they're counting on. Mr. Hayes, can I ask, did something happen yesterday at the house?
I said, why do you ask that?
What hope do you have against me? Because you went 7 months without calling me, and then you called at 8 in the morning the day after Thanksgiving. Walter told me there'd be a holiday that finally did it. He was specific about that. He said, Gerald can't help himself in front of a full table.
I sat very still in the cold car. I said, he stood up during the toast. He said the estate gets handled within the family. He said my brother isn't blood, doesn't count, in front of 40 people. There was a pause on the line. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. Not warmer, just lower, the way a voice goes lower when it stops persuading and starts telling you the truth.
What hope do you have against me? Did he ask you to sign anything?
I said, he called this morning. He said he'd handle Pop's estate himself, keep it in the family, no lawyers. He said he'd have me and Claire sign a couple of things to keep it simple.
What hope do you have against me? Do not sign anything. Do you understand me, Mr. Hayes? Not one piece of paper, not a card, not a form, not a release that looks like nothing. If Gerald puts a pen in your hand, you put it down and you call me. Will you do that?
I said, I'll do that, but you have to tell me something first. He acted like the estate was a mess of his to clean up, like it was already his. Is it his?
What hope do you have against me? No. It is not his. And I think a part of you already knew that, or you wouldn't have called me at 8 in the morning. I can't lay it all out over a phone in your driveway. Some of it I'm not free to say until certain things are filed, and some of it you need to hear in Walter's own voice, not mine. But I'll tell you the shape of it, because you've earned the shape. What hope do you have against me? Walter came to me because he was afraid of exactly the thing your father-in-law did at that table last night. He set something up to stop it, and he chose you to hold the peace that makes it work. Not his son, not his grandchildren. You.
I said. Why me? I'm the help. I sit in the hallway.
What hope do you have against me? He had a different word for you. You'll hear it. Listen to me carefully. When you're ready to hear that recording, I want you sitting across a table from me. What hope do you have against me? Because there are things on it that Walter could not say to anyone in that family while he was alive, and you are going to be the only person who can make the rest of it true. What hope do you have against me? There's more than what's on that recorder, Mr. Hayes, a great deal more, and not all of it is about you.
Not all of it is about you. I sat in the cold driveway with the engine off and the envelope on the passenger seat, and I understood in my stomach, before my head caught up, that I'd spent 9 years thinking I was the only one they did this to. And I was about to find out I was wrong. I told you the bottom was the toast. I believed that myself for about a night. You think you've hit the floor of a thing, and then a hand reaches down and shows you there's a basement under the basement, and the worst part is the hand belongs to someone who means you well. The toast had ended hours before. We'd driven home in the dark, Claire asleep against the window past the second exit, and I'd sat on the edge of the bed with Pop's padded envelope on my knees and not pressed play. The way I told you, because the second I pressed play, I'd stop being the help and start being something the Whitmans didn't have a name for yet. So I'd held it one more night. And in the morning, in the cold driveway, with the engine off and the envelope on the passenger seat, I'd called the number Pop left, and a woman had answered on the second ring like she'd been waiting 7 months, which it turned out she had. Before I give you the call, I want to set down one small thing I noticed and could not yet read because it sat under the whole morning like a stone under a rug. Every year for 9 years, Gerald made me hold the recorder. This year, for the first time, he had asked me at the door, on my way out the night before, light as a man asking about the weather, whether I'd ever bothered to clear the old files off it. I'd said I hadn't. He'd nodded and looked at nothing, the way a man looks at nothing when he's just learned something he didn't want to know, and then he'd told me to drive safe. I had not understood the question then. I filed it the way you file a sound in the wall you can't place. He had never once cared what was on that recorder in 9 years. He cared now. I'd find out within the hour exactly how much. That was Rosa Delgado. I want to slow down and give you that call because everything that came after grew out of it, and because for the first few minutes of it I had no idea I was talking to the only person on earth who'd come for me. She had a voice that didn't waste itself. No warm-up, no how are you holding up. Just my name said the right way. Not the help, not the renter. My name, the way you say a name when you've been waiting to.
What hope do you have against me? Mr. Hayes, Daniel, I've been expecting your call for 7 months. I'd given up on this year and started telling myself it'd be next.
I sat there in the cold car with my breath fogging the windshield and the family's black recorder on the seat beside Pop's envelope, and I said the only honest thing I had, which was that I didn't really know why I was calling. She didn't treat that like nothing. She let it sit a second, the way Pop used to let a thing sit, and then she asked me a question that told me she already knew more about my life than anyone in the family I'd married into.
What hope do you happen yesterday? At the house, a holiday.
I asked her why she'd ask that. There was a pause on the line, and when she spoke again, her voice had gone lower, the way a voice goes lower when it stops being polite and starts telling you the truth.
What hope do you have against me? Because you went 7 months without calling me, and then you called at 8 in the morning the day after Thanksgiving. Walter told me there'd be a holiday that finally did it. He was specific about that. He said, sooner or later Gerald can't help himself in front of a full table, so I'll ask you plainly, What did he do?
I told her. I told her about the toast, about the candles, about Gerald standing at the head of his table and saying the estate would be handled within the family, no lawyers, no charity cases with their hands out. I told her he'd called my brother not blood here either, in front of 40 people, a room of strangers who'd never heard Eli's name. I heard myself say it and I had to stop for a second, because saying it to her, out loud, in a car, made it real in a way it hadn't been when it was happening to me in a hallway. She was quiet long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Then she said it, flat, like a diagnosis.
What hope do you have against me? Then it's already started. I'm sorry, Daniel. I hoped I'd be wrong about the shape of it, and I'm not. Did he ask you to sign anything yet?
He hadn't. Not at that point. He would an hour later, on a second call. And I'll get to that, because the way the two calls fit together that morning is the whole architecture of the day. But for now, I told her no. Nobody asks me to sign things. I clear plates.
What hope do you have against me? They will. Trust me on the shape of it, even if you don't have the why yet. Now I need you to do something hard. I need you to not do the thing your whole body is going to want to do, which is to drive over there and put what you know on the table. Can you hear me on that? Nothing fast. Fast is exactly what they're built for.
I told her I wasn't planning anything fast. I told her honestly that I wasn't planning anything at all. That somewhere around the part of the toast where Gerald said my brother wasn't blood, I'd decided I would drive home, be done, not loud, not with a scene, just done. The way you're done with a road you've finally admitted goes nowhere. 9 Thanksgivings is a long time to keep mistaking a closed door for a door you haven't found the trick of yet.
What hope do you have against me? Don't be done either. Not yet. Done is a thing you've earned and a thing you can have. But if you walk away today, you walk away from something Walter spent the last 2 years of his life building, with you in the middle of it. So before you decide anything, you're going to let me tell you what's in your hands. Have you opened the envelope he left you?
I told her I'd opened it the night before. A letter, several pages, in Pop's slow, careful hand, with 2 signatures at the bottom that weren't his, and a small recorder, not the family's black one, a different one, with a note that said play this first, then call the number. I told her I hadn't pressed play.
What hope do you have against me? Good. Don't. Not in the car and not alone. I mean that. When you hear it, you're going to want to move, and I need you steady, not wrecked in a driveway. Let me tell you what you've got instead, because you've earned the shape of it even if you can't have the whole thing on a phone. Walter came to my office a little under 2 years ago, before the bad winter. What hope do you have against me? He was himself, completely himself, sharp as a tack, and twice as stubborn, and he made me put 2 things together for him, and he was very specific about who they were for. Not for his son, not for his grandson, Trevor, for you.
For me? I said it back to her, and it came out wrong, disbelieving. Pop and I were close, but he didn't owe me anything. I married his granddaughter. That's all I am to him on paper. The boy who married up. Gerald's right about that part, at least.
What hope do you have against me? Pop didn't think in paper until the day he made me draw some up. The first thing is a letter, handwritten, witnessed. 2 witnesses and me in my office, his signature steady as a young man's. In it, Walter says, in his own words, what he wanted done with his estate, and who he was worried would try to do something else with it. He names names, Daniel. He was not vague. What hope do you have against me? He'd seen this play run before in his own family, and he wanted it on the record that he saw it coming.
Seen it run before. I asked her what that meant, run before. She told me we'd get there, not on a phone, and the way she said not on a phone told me there was a great deal she was holding that a driveway couldn't hold.
What hope do you have against me? The second item is the one that made me wait 7 months for you instead of forgetting you existed. The second item is a recording. Pop sat in my office and recorded a statement, sealed. What hope do you have against me? with instructions that it was to be given to one person and one person only by name if a particular thing ever happened. He recorded it himself, in his own voice, fully himself. What hope do you have against me? And the person he named Daniel.
She stopped because she wanted me to be the one who said it, and I couldn't, so she said it for me.
What hope do you have against me? Was you, not his son, not Claire, not Trevor? He looked at his whole family, and he picked the man they sit in the hallway. He gave the sealed statement to me to hold, a second copy. What hope do you have against me? And he gave a copy to you to keep, and the name on both sets of instructions is yours. I've been waiting 7 months for the particular thing to happen that would let you call me. What hope do you have against me? I think it happened last night at that table with a glass in his son's hand.
I'm going to slow down here because this is the part of the morning I've gone over the most, and I want to get it right. There was no flood of feeling. People expect there to have been, and there wasn't. What there was a small, specific picture. Pop in a brown cardigan in a lawyer's office I'd never seen, talking to a machine, saying my name to it, knowing I wouldn't hear the thing for years, maybe never, depending on what his family did or didn't do. He'd recorded a message for a future I was sitting in right now. He'd reached 7 months past his own death to put his hand on my shoulder in a cold car. And the only one in that whole family who'd ever called me son had, the whole time, been the only one who saw me at all. They handed me the recorder every year so I'd vanish into the hallway. Would you have kept 9 years of those toasts? Every promise, every closed door, or deleted them the night you got home, the way a sane man deletes the worst day of his year? I kept them. I didn't know why. I'm still not sure I knew why. Tell me what you'd have done with 9 years of being made small, recorded in your own pocket.
What hope do you have against me? I'm not going to play the sealed one for you here, she said before I could ask, because she'd heard my breath change. Not over a phone, not in a driveway, with you about to drive into traffic. What hope do you have against me? You'll understand why when you hear it, and you won't be able to unhear it, and I need you steady for what comes after, not falling apart on a highway. What I need from you this morning is smaller. What hope do you have against me? Go inside, eat something. What hope do you have against me?
Sign anything, I said. Why would I sign anything? Nobody asks me to sign things. I clear plates.
What hope do you have against me? They will today, she said. A man who keeps a lawyer out of his father's estate is a man with a paper he doesn't want looked at. And a man with a paper he doesn't want looked at gets very nervous the morning after he says too much at a full table. He doesn't know I exist in his problem yet, but he's a careful man, and careful men tidy up after holidays. What hope do you have against me? He is going to come at you today, by phone most likely, and he is going to be warmer to you than he has been in 9 years. When that happens, and it will happen within the hour, you say one thing. You say, I'll have someone look at it. Can you say that?
I'll have someone look at it, I said.
What hope do you have against me? Say it like you mean it and not like you're scared of him.
I'll have someone look at it, I said again.
What hope do you have against me?
And then she said the thing I carried into the rest of that day, the thing I didn't react to because she'd told me not to, even alone in a car where there was no one to perform calm for. Her voice changed when she said it. Not warmer, just careful, the way you carry something you don't want to drop.
What hope do you have against me? Pop set up a thing for your brother, she said quietly. That's all I'll say on a phone. Pop set up a thing for Eli, specifically, a protected thing, and I need you to keep that behind your teeth today, because there's a man who would very much like to know how much you know, and the answer he needs to keep believing is nothing. He thinks you're the help. Let him keep thinking it one more day.
I kept it behind my teeth. I am proud of almost nothing about that morning, but I am a little proud of the fact that I went inside my own house with a woman's voice still in my ear telling me my dead grandfather-in-law had built something for my disabled brother in secret, and I put the kettle on, and I did not call Claire to the kitchen, and I did not drive 90 minutes to sit with Eli and blurt it out across his table, the way every cell in me wanted to. Eli was where Eli always is on a holiday, at home 90 minutes up the highway, with the radio on low, waiting up the way he waits up even when there's nowhere for him to go. I had a thing for him in my chest now that I couldn't hand him yet. I'd never wanted to drive to my brother more in my life, and I made myself stand still. You already know who Eli is. My younger brother, the gentlest man I've ever sat across from, the one the Whitmans knew the way you know a fact off a form and never once drove out to meet. What you need to hold here is only this. Pop did drive out. Pop was the one believer at that table, and the one believer in Eli, too, and the last Christmas he was alive, he gave my brother a radio with real weight to it, and Eli keeps it on Pop's old station still. And now a stranger on a phone had told me that the same man had reached past his own death to build my brother a floor to stand on, and that another man at that table was already pulling it out from under him. I want to be honest about the size of me right then. There was no plan in me, no card up a sleeve. There was a kettle going cold on the stove and a folder's worth of light coming through a crack in the 7 months I'd been living blind in. I understood almost nothing. I understood that Pop had left me 2 things, a letter and a sealed recording. I understood there'd been no real reading and that the family had handled the estate behind a closed door. I did not yet know what the recording said. I did not know what the letter named. I did not know what Pop had built for Eli or what Gerald had done to it. I didn't have a single date in my head that meant anything. All I had was the shape of a hidden thing, the way you can feel a stare in the dark with your foot before your eyes find it. What changed in me, standing in my kitchen with a phone going warm in my hand, wasn't knowledge. It was the floor. For 9 years I'd stood on a story. Daniel married up. Daniel doesn't belong. Daniel should be grateful we let him carry the chairs. And I'd half believed it. The way you come to half believe anything a whole room agrees on while you stand right there saying nothing. Now a 60-year-old woman had told me, in a flat, unsentimental voice, that the man I'd loved most in that family had seen me, had named me, had reached past his own death to do it. The story didn't break all at once. It just stopped being the only story in the room. And a man who has more than one story to stand on is a different man than the one who has to take the chair he's given. I felt the family's black recorder differently than I had the night before. It was still on the passenger seat in the cold car, but I went back out and brought it in and set it on the kitchen table and looked at it. The same black plastic, the same steady red eye. The same thing they'd handed me at the top of every dinner for 9 years. Go fetch the camera, Daniel. Work the toast. So I'd take myself down the hall and out of the picture while the real family said the real things. It had always been the badge of my exile, the chore that proved I was staff. But Delgado had said the word recording about Pop, and somewhere in the back of my skull 2 facts had drifted close enough to touch, and I'd flinched away from the touch because I wasn't ready. Pop recorded a statement. I had recorded 9 years of statements. Pop's lawyer held one machine downtown. I'd been carrying the other one in my pocket every 4th Thursday of November since before Claire and I were married. I didn't follow the thought to its end that morning. I want to be honest about that. I just felt the weight of the thing on my table change from a chore into a question, the way a key in your hand stops being metal the second you learn what door it fits, even before you've found the door. And here is the recap. A tired man gives himself at his own kitchen table when the floor has just moved. 7 months ago, Pop died, and the family handled his estate behind a closed door. Before that, before the bad winter, Pop went to a lawyer himself, sharp and sure, and left 2 things addressed to one person by name, a witnessed letter saying what he wanted and who he feared, and a sealed recording in his own voice to be opened if a particular thing ever happened. The person he named was not his son. It was not his granddaughter. It was the man they sit in the hallway and call the help. And last night, for the first time in 7 months, the particular thing had happened. A son had raised a glass and said a brother wasn't blood. And this morning the lawyer had finally been able to tell that man a dead man had been waiting to speak to him this whole time. I did not feel powerful. What I felt was smaller and harder than power. I had stopped being available to be talked out of myself. The machine they'd built around me ran on one fuel, me agreeing I was nobody, and Delgado had just cut the fuel line without playing a second of audio. It took Gerald 51 minutes. I kept the number, the way you keep a number to hold your hand still when the rest of you is itching to do something you'll regret. 51 minutes after I hung up with Delgado, my own phone lit up with Gerald's name, and I let it ring twice, and I picked it up. And the voice that came through it was a voice I had not heard him use in 9 Thanksgivings. Warm, open, a father's voice. The golden sun voice Trevor wears, except Gerald's was the original it was copied from, and hearing it come down the line first thing in the morning was like having a coat I'd been cold in for years suddenly offered to me, fitted, smelling of money.
Daniel, you get home all right last night? Roads weren't bad?
You get home all right. He'd never once asked me that. 9 years of driving 40 minutes home from his table, and not once had Gerald Whitman wondered whether I made it. And now, the morning after, here he was warming the line up, and I understood. Delgado had been right to the hour. That the warmth was a tool he'd reached for, not because anything in him had softened, but because a careful man tidies up after a holiday where he said too much in front of a full room.
Good, good. Listen, son. About last night. I owe you something on that. The toast. I'd had a few. You know how I get going and I don't hear myself. Claire's furious with me. She's right to be. That's not how I feel about you. That's a man being a fool with a glass in his hand.
Son. He'd never once called me that. Pop had, and Pop was dead, and now Gerald reached past his dead father to use the old man's word on me down a phone line, and I said nothing. And I'd just learned the night before that silence was a thing I could afford to spend. A certain kind of man cannot stand a silence, and Gerald was that kind, and he filled it the way he always filled a room.
And listen, while I've got you, I want to get ahead of something, because I'd rather you hear it from family than from a stranger. Pop's estate. It's a mess, Daniel. Old men, they don't keep things tidy. There's paperwork that overlaps, some of it doesn't agree with the other. You put 2 lawyers on it, and you'll get 3 opinions and a bill for $40,000. The last thing any of us needs is some lawyer in there taking a third of it to tell us what we already know. So I'm going to handle it. Keep it in the family. Quiet. I don't want strangers picking over Pop's life.
Keep it in the family, I said. I said it flat, the way you say a thing back to a man so he'll keep talking and hand you more of himself, and he did.
That's all it is. We sit down, the family, and we sort what Pop wanted between us, like he'd have wanted, instead of feeding it to lawyers. Trust me, you don't want some hourly vendor with her hooks in Pop's life. People like that don't lift a finger for free. We handle it ourselves, quiet, and nobody has to pay a stranger.
It was, I'll give him this, well built. If I'd had nothing but the 7 months, it would have worked. A tired man told for 9 years he was lucky, handed a warm father's voice down a morning phone and a reasonable fear of $40,000 lawyers. That man agrees to whatever keeps the warm voice talking. But I had a folder's worth of light coming through the crack now, and one of the things the light showed was this. A man who has nothing to hide does not call you first thing the morning after to tell you the lawyer is the danger.
There's no rush on any of it, he went on, and here it came, smooth as a hand sliding a plate off a table. But it'd help me, honestly. If you and Claire would just initial a couple of things so I can move the estate along without it stalling out in court for 2 years. Nothing big. A family settlement, a release. It just says you and I agreed to keep it among us, handle Pop's wishes like family, no outside parties. Claire's already comfortable with it. Trevor signed his yesterday. You'd be the last one. And then it's done, and we never have to talk about money at a holiday again. I'll bring it by, or you can swing through, whatever's easy. 5 minutes with a pen.
There it was. A family settlement, a release, just your initials. The same words he'd put into my pocket the night before in his own voice, with a glass in his hand and the date stamping itself the instant he spoke. Handled within the family, no lawyers, the brother doesn't count, except now they came gently, like a favor, like a decent human being saving us both a trip. He'd put an apology in one hand and a paper in the other, and the apology was the spoon the medicine came on. And I want that on the record, that for half a second, the easiest thing in the world was to say yes. Sure, Gerald, I'll swing through. Not because I believed him, because the warm voice was so much better than the cold one, and I was so tired, and a part of me that had been carrying chairs for 9 years just wanted for once to be the son a man called son. That's the machine. You don't make a man sign by convincing him. You make him sign by offering him, for 1 second, the thing he stopped letting himself want. Gerald had built that machine around me a long time ago. He'd just never had to put a pen in it before, because until last night it had never occurred to him I might be holding anything worth a signature. I'll have someone look at it, I said. I said it exactly the way Delgado had made me practice an hour before, flat, not scared, and I listened to what it did to the line. The warmth held 1 beat past where a real warmth holds, and that 1 beat, even down a phone, even with no face to read, was the truest thing he showed me all morning.
Someone, he said. Who's someone? It's a family paper, Daniel. You don't need a...
I'll have someone look at it, I said again.
You're going to put a lawyer on a release that protects you. That's what this does, you understand. It keeps you out of the ugliness. You sign, you're clean, nobody can drag you into a dispute. You don't sign, and when this gets messy, and old men's estates get messy, you're standing in the open.
Then it sits unsigned until someone's read it, I said. That isn't me lawyering up, Gerald. That's just me being a slow reader. The father's voice cost him something to keep on now. I could hear the price of it in the spaces between the words. And then he did the thing that told me the most, more than the paper, more than the word son. The warmth dropped clean out of the line for a second, and what came up under it was not anger. It was a question, asked too easily, by a man stepping over a line he'd decided not to look at.
Let me ask you something else while I've got you, he said. Easy, a host tidying up. That recorder. The one you ran the toast on last night. You still got it, or did you leave it in the drawer at the house? Because there's no point you holding on to that thing all year. You did your bit, you got the toast. Why don't you run it back over and I'll put it with the others? Save you the trip the next time.
I told him I hadn't decided what to do with it yet. There was a small silence, and when he came back, the host was thinner over the other thing.
Decided. It's a recorder, Daniel, not the family silver. You don't decide about a thing that isn't yours. I gave it to you to run the toast, not to keep. Bring it Sunday. Then, quieter, like a man who's caught his own voice climbing and pulled it back down a stair. You don't want to be the one holding things that belong to this family. That's a bad way to end up, ask Nadine.
Ask Nadine. He said the name like a man flicking a card onto a table and taking it back too fast for you to read it, and then he laughed and called it nothing, and moved on. I did not know yet who Nadine was. I filed her with the question about the old files, in the wall, with the sounds I couldn't place. He'd just named a second person without meaning to, and it would be 3 weeks before I understood I'd been handed a thread. And I understood, the way you understand weather, that Gerald Whitman had just made his first mistake of the morning, because until that second I had not known the recorder mattered. I'd thought it was a chore. He'd thought so too, for 9 years. But the night before, he'd said too much in front of a full table, and this morning a slow reader he couldn't move was sitting between him and a clean signature, and a man who has started to look at you like a threat starts counting the things in your hands. He'd pushed the pen I wouldn't take and the paper I wouldn't sign, and then, in the same breath, gentle as anything, he'd reached for the one thing he suddenly, badly, did not want me to keep. He didn't know what was on it. Neither, fully, did I. But we both knew in the same instant, on opposite ends of a phone line over a children's holiday, neither of us would ever describe the same way again, that he had just reached for it, and that I had not yet handed it over. I told him I'd think about the recorder. I did not tell him it was already on my kitchen table with its red eye steady, or that an hour earlier a woman I'd met only through a dead man's letter had told me to keep it and not sign anything, or that somewhere on it, alongside 9 years of his toasts, there might be a thing he'd want very much for no one to ever hear. I told him I'd think about it, and I told him I'd be in touch about the paper, and he said, "Good man, that's the Daniel I like," and he hung up pleased with me. He hung up believing the help would come around, the way the help always came around. And I stood in my kitchen with 2 recorders on the table. Pop's small one, sealed, cued and unplayed, and the family's black one, 9 years deep, and a phone going cold in my hand, and I understood that the morning had handed me the shape of a hidden thing and nothing more. The light was coming through the crack in the 7 months. It was enough to see by, and it was not enough to see. The drive home that night took 40 minutes, and I did not say a word for 39 of them. Claire kept her hands in her lap. She had stood in that dining room while her father told the table that Pop's estate would be handled within the family, and she had not corrected him, and she knew I had heard the gap where her voice should have been. So she sat there with the streetlight sliding across her face, and I drove, and the only thing in the back seat was the handheld recorder her father had pushed into my hands at the start of the toast. The same one he hands me every year. "Go fetch the camera, Daniel. Get the toast." I had gotten the toast. I had gotten all of them. When we pulled into our own driveway, Claire finally spoke, and what she said was not the thing I expected.
That lawyer? The one Dad keeps calling Pop's lawyer like it's a joke. The one he swears Pop never should have hired. Why would Pop have an attorney none of us were ever allowed to meet?
I cut the engine. "Rosa Delgado."
You know her name.
I know her name.
How do you know her name, Daniel?
I looked at her for a long second. There was a thing I had carried for 7 months that I had never told my wife, because every time I had reached for it, I had pictured her face doing exactly what her father's face did, and I could not survive both of them looking at me that way in one lifetime. But the recorder was in the back seat, and Claire had just asked Pop's lawyer's name out loud in the dark like it meant something to her too, and the time for carrying things alone had run out. "Because Pop didn't trust his own children," I said. "He told me that himself. Before he died, he gave me something. He made me promise not to open it unless they tried to move the money." Claire did not move. The porch light we had left on threw a square of yellow across the dashboard.
Gave you what, Daniel?
A statement, in his own voice, and a letter. I watched her hands. "He told me your father would come for the estate the way he comes for everything, quietly, with a smile and a clipboard, and he told me that when that happened, the people who'd believe me wouldn't be in this family."
That's not Dad wouldn't. She stopped because she heard it leave her own mouth, the sentence she had been saying her whole life. That's just how Dad is. Dad wouldn't. When did Pop give you this?
7 months ago. The Tuesday before he passed in the spring. He had me come alone. He didn't want Trevor there, and he didn't want you there, and I asked him why, and you know what he said?
What did he say?
He said, "Because you're the only one at my table who never wanted anything from me." I let that sit in the car. "Your grandfather, Claire. The man your father called confused. The man Trevor said wasn't himself anymore. He sat me down, and he was sharp as a knife, and he handed me a sealed bag, and he said, 'Don't open it unless they move on Eli.'
And they're moving on Eli.
Your father said it out loud tonight, in front of 40 people, that my brother isn't blood here either." I turned to look at her. "So now I get to open it." A sealed statement. He recorded it. And a letter, witnessed, with 2 signatures that aren't anyone's in that house. I took the recorder off the back seat and set it on the console between us, this cheap black thing with a scuff on the corner from 9 years of being handed to the help. He gave it to me, Claire. Not to your father, not to Trevor, to the renter. She started to cry then, the quiet kind, the kind that does not ask to be comforted, and I let her. I had learned a long time ago that there is a difference between a woman who is crying because you hurt her and a woman who is crying because she has just understood that the people who raised her have been telling her a story.
I want to hear it.
Not yet, I said. Not like this. If I open it tonight, in this driveway, angry, it's just a grandson's tape and a grieving man's letter, and your father has accountants who'll call it a forgery before I finish the sentence. I picked the recorder back up. There's a right way to do this, and it isn't us in a car at midnight. She was quiet a while, looking at the dark house through the windshield. Then she said the thing that told me she was already further along than she wanted to be.
When I was little, there was a Thanksgiving Nadine wasn't at the table. My sister. I'd forgotten until just now. She was in the hall at the kids' table, and I asked Mom why, and Mom said because Nadine was being difficult about Pop's money. Claire's voice thinned. I haven't thought about that in 20 years. Why did I just think about that, Daniel?
I didn't answer her. I didn't have the answer yet myself. That name had been handed to me twice now in 1 week, once by her father like a threat, and once by my wife like a thing surfacing in dark water. I only said, "Hold on to that. Don't go looking. Just don't let yourself lose it again." She nodded slowly, and I watched her not lose it. That was the night the humiliation went quiet in me and something slower took its place. Claire heard the change in how little I was saying, and it scared her more than shouting would have. I want to tell you what I did over the next 11 days, because none of it required anything I learned from a paycheck. It required only that I had been the man nobody watched. For 9 years, the Whitmans had treated me as furniture, and furniture sees everything. I was the one sent to the kitchen to give the family a minute. I was the one who cleared the office while Gerald walked guests to their cars. I was the one handed the recorder and told to keep the toasts. So we'll have them someday. They never once imagined that someday belonged to me. The first thing I did was lay the paper out. This spring, on the Sunday after Pop's funeral, the family had gathered at the Whitman house to sort things out. I had been sent, as always, to clear the kitchen. And on the counter, under a casserole dish nobody had touched, was a folder. It was open. It was open because Gerald did not consider me a person who could read. I had taken 3 photographs of the top page with my phone, the way you photograph a thing you do not yet understand, but know you are not supposed to be seeing, and then I had put the casserole dish back exactly where it had been and walked out with the trash. I had never looked at those photographs closely. For months, they had sat in a folder on my phone called Receipts, between a parking stub and a picture of Eli's birthday cake. Now I looked. The top page was a power of attorney instrument. It named Gerald Whitman as the person authorized to act for Walter Whitman in matters of the estate. And at the bottom, above a line that said Walter R. Whitman, there was a signature, and beside the signature, there was a date. The date was March 11th. I sat with that for a while. March 11th meant nothing to me until I made myself find out what it meant. So I opened the recorder. Pop's voice memos lived on it alongside 9 years of Whitman toasts, because the family had never bothered to clear the device they considered mine to carry. Pop liked to talk to me when no one was around. He would catch me in the hallway by the folding table and say, "Daniel, son, sit a minute." And he would tell me about the war and about Eli and about the orchard he grew up near. And sometimes, near the end, when he was tired, he would ask me to keep the recorder running because he liked hearing himself sound like he used to. There was a recording dated March 11th. I am not going to tell you yet what is on it. I want you to understand only the shape of what I found, because the shape is the whole thing. On March 11th, The day Pop's signature supposedly went onto a document handing Gerald the keys to the estate. Pop was with me, not near me, not in the house. With me in a place that was not the Whitman house, doing a thing a man cannot do in two places at once. There was one thing about that file I held back even from myself for a day, and I'll only tell you the size of it now, not the substance. That night, long ago, before I ever drove home, I had copied the March 11th recording off the device and onto my phone the way I copied every file, out of a habit Pop had taught me and Gerald had never thought to watch for. One file. Gerald did not know it had ever left the recorder. He would spend the next 3 weeks trying to get the black machine back into a drawer in his house, never once guessing there was a second copy of the 1 minute he most needed gone. I was not ready to play it for anyone, but I knew, sitting there, that when the day came to play it, it would not be a thing he could reach. The signature said one thing. The clock said another. The date on the paper they swore Pop signed sits right next to a timestamp that says he couldn't have. Which one would you trust? The signature or the clock? I did not trust myself yet. I am a careful man, which is a polite way of saying I have been wrong about people I loved, and I have decided never to feel that particular way again. So I did not call anyone. I did not confront Claire's father. I built. I went back through the recorder a day at a time. 9 Thanksgivings, 9 years of Gerald raising his glass and saying things he believed no one was keeping. And the device kept time on all of it, every file stamped, hour and minute and year, the way a cheap recorder does without being asked, because a machine does not know who is furniture and who is family. I found the toast from 2 Novembers back where Gerald, 3 glasses in, had told the table that Pop was not himself anymore, and that somebody responsible was going to have to step in before the old man gives the house to a stranger. The room had laughed. I had been in the hallway with the recorder, told to wait until they called for the camera. The machine had been running the whole time. I found the closed-door ones, too. After the guests left, Gerald and Trevor would go into the office and they would send me to wrap the leftovers, and I would set the recorder on the hall table by the folding chairs because my hands were full of foil and the office door is hollow and the recorder is patient. And I found March 11th, the recording itself, and I made myself listen to all of it, twice, before I let myself believe what it meant. I am not going to play it for you here. I will tell you only what was around it. On that day, Pop was not at the Whitman house, where a signature supposedly went on to a power of attorney while Gerald watched. He was an hour north with me at the orchard he grew up near, the one he talked about on the recorder all those evenings in the hallway. He had asked me to drive him there in the spring, one more time, while he still could. We had taken Eli. The 3 of us had stood under bare trees that had not flowered yet, and Pop had put his hand on my brother's shoulder and called him Buddy, and I had let the recorder run because Pop liked the sound of his own voice telling the old stories. The file is stamped with the day and the hour. The same day. The same hour a man's hand was supposedly steady on a page 60 miles south. A man cannot stand in an orchard with his arm around a boy and sign a document in another county at the same minute. The clock does not allow it. The clock is the one thing in this whole story that was never on anybody's side, which is exactly why it is the only thing I trusted. So let me say plainly what I had before I tell you what I did with it. Pop, the only one at that table who ever called me son, had left me a sealed recorded statement and a witnessed letter before he died, and he had given them to me instead of to his own children, naming what the family was doing and to whom. That was the first thing. The second thing was newer and colder. The date on the in-laws Pop signed this himself paperwork did not match. It collided with the timestamp on my recording and with the dated photos I had taken of the documents on their kitchen counter. The signature Gerald swore Pop wrote could not have been written when they said 2 things: a dead man's voice and a clock that called the family liars. I had been carrying the first for 7 months. I had been carrying the second since the spring and had not known it was a weapon until the night Gerald told a room my brother wasn't blood. They handed me the recorder every year so I'd vanish into the hallway. Would you have kept 9 years of those toasts, or deleted them the night you got home? I kept them. I am telling you, I kept all of them. On the 4th day, I told Claire I needed her for one thing, and only one, and that she could say no. The family group text, I said. The one with your father and Trevor and your aunt, the one I was never added to.
What about it?
I need it from the day Pop died to the day they filed Gerald as executor. Every message, screenshots in order, with the dates showing. She went still in the way that a person goes still when you have asked them to choose a side out loud, which is different from choosing it in your heart, and harder.
If I do this, I can't take it back. He's my father, Daniel.
I know what he is to you, I said. I'm not asking you to stop loving him. I'm asking you whether what they did to Pop and what they're doing to Eli is a thing you want to have helped hide. That was the only sharp thing I said to my wife in 11 days, and I am not proud of it, but it was true, and she knew it was true. And the next morning she handed me her phone without a word and walked into the other room so she would not have to watch me read her family. I read her family. The group text was worse than the paper. Paper at least pretends to be careful. People texting their relatives do not pretend at all. 3 days after Pop's funeral, Gerald had written, "Handled the POA, everything's clean, just need Walter's John Hancock dated back so it tracks." Trevor had replied with a laughing face and the words "Golden Dad." And then, 2 messages down. The thing that turned my stomach to stone, because it was the first time I saw my brother's name in their hands. Trevor had written, "What about the kid, the slow one? Pop earmarked a chunk for him." And Gerald had written back, "Nobody's going to fight for the renter's brother. Moves to the grandkid's side. Clean." The renter's brother, the slow one, a chunk. I want to be careful here, because Eli deserves better than to be a plot point in the story of the men who tried to rob him, so I will only tell you what is true. My brother Eli is the kindest person I have ever sat across a table from. He laughs at the same joke every time as if he has never heard it, which is its own kind of gift. Pop adored him. The 2 of them used to sit at the folding table together in the hallway. The old man and the parked-away boy. 2 people the Whitmans had decided did not count. And they would split a plate and Pop would call him Buddy, and Eli would call Pop the cowboy because of a hat Pop wore once. Pop set money aside for Eli so that whatever happened to me, my brother would never be at the mercy of a room that called him not blood. That was the whole of Pop's plan. A trust. A protected, quiet, decent thing. Pop's provision was supposed to go to my brother Eli. It went, on paper, to the men who filmed me carving. What would you call that? I called it the reason I was no longer in a hurry. Now I had 3 things laid beside each other on my kitchen table. And they did not match, and the way they did not match was the whole case. I had a document dated March 11th with Pop's signature on it. I had a recording dated March 11th that put Pop somewhere a signing could not have happened. And I had a text from Gerald asking Trevor to get the signature dated back so it tracks, a man asking in writing for a date to be made to lie. The date on the paper, the time stamp on the clock, the text where he asked for the first to be bent to fit the second. 3 dates, and only one truth between them. I am not a man who knows how courts work. I want that understood because the temptation, when you finally have the thing that can save you, is to believe you are clever, and cleverness is exactly what gets a man like me dismissed as a bitter renter who faked a tape. I did not trust my own hands with this. I trusted the woman who had stood up in the dining room. On the 6th day, I called Rosa Delgado. I had her number because she had pressed her card into my palm at Pop's funeral this spring when no one was looking and said only, "He spoke about you. If anything ever isn't right, you call me and you don't call anyone else first." I had kept the card in the same folder on my phone as the photographs. Receipts. She remembered me before I finished my name.
What hope do you have against me? I wondered if this would be the year.
There's a power of attorney, I said. Dated March 11th. Gerald's filed as executor.
What hope do you have against me? I know about the filing. I've been waiting for standing to challenge it. What I've never had is a reason a judge would take seriously over the word of a grieving family. A pause. Do you have one?
I have Walter on the March 11th. His hand supposedly went onto that paper, I said. I have him on a recording, dated somewhere else, and I have Gerald asking in a text to have the date made to track. The line was quiet for long enough that I thought I had lost her.
What hope do you have part again?
Gerald texted Trevor 3 days after the funeral. He wrote that he needed Walter's signature dated back so it tracks. I'm reading it off the screenshot right now.
What hope do you have against phone?
His daughter, my wife. She gave me the thread herself.
Willingly, she'll say so under oath.
She wrote it out and signed it before I asked her to, I said. She's done excusing him. I heard a chair move on her end, the sound of a person sitting forward.
What hope do you have against me? Mr. Hayes, I'm going to ask you 3 questions, and I need plain answers. Did you alter any of these files in any way? Trim them, rename them, move them between devices?
No. They're on the same recorder he's handed me every Thanksgiving for 9 years. I never even cleared it.
What hope do you have against me? Have you played any of this for anyone in that family?
No one. Not even Claire's heard the March 11th recording.
What hope do you have against me? And the sealed statement Walter left you, have you opened it?
I made a copy 7 months ago and I haven't touched it since. He told me not to unless they moved on my brother.
What hope do you have against me? Then don't touch it now, she said. You've done the hardest part already, which is that you waited. What hope do you have against me? Mr. Hayes, I need you to listen to me carefully and not do the thing every honest person wants to do, which is to confront them with what you have. Her voice was even. What hope do you have against me, the way a surgeon's hands are even? If you play that recording at a dinner table, it is a sad story. If you hand me the original device, unedited, with its file stamps intact, what hope do you have against me? And we let a court-appointed examiner pull the dates off it independently. It is evidence. What hope do you have against me? The difference between those 2 things is everything your grandfather-in-law was counting on you to understand.
He's not my grandfather, I said. He's Claire's. They never let me forget the difference.
What hope do you have against me? He called you son in a sealed statement he left in my custody for 2 years, she said. I'd let the family argue about the difference in front of a judge.
What do you need from me? I said.
What hope do you have against me? The device intact. The photos with their original dates. Your wife's account, signed. And then I need you to do the one thing that's going to feel impossible. A pause. I need you to go to Thanksgiving.
You want me to walk back into that house?
What hope do you have against me? I want you in that room when this happens, Daniel, because the law is going to do this in front of the people who watched them do it to you, and a judge already agreed the witnesses are the family. You don't say a word. You don't play anything. You sit at the table you were never allowed at, and you let the court read the clock.
And if Gerald tries to move it, a courthouse, somewhere quiet?
What hope do you have against me? Then he tells a judge he'd rather not have his own relatives hear the truth, she said. Let him try.
That was the first time I knew the sealed statement existed in 2 places. I had a copy. She had the original, witnessed in her custody, where Pop had put a second one so that no fire in my house and no cousin in my driveway could ever make it disappear. The old man had chosen me, and then he had backed me up. I gave her everything. The recorder, by courier, in a sealed bag. She told me exactly how to fill out so the chain would hold. The photographs, Claire's screenshots, with Claire's written, signed account beside them, because my wife had decided, somewhere in those 11 days, which side of her own father she was going to stand on, and once she decided, she did not flinch. Then I did the hardest thing in the whole story, which was nothing. For 2 weeks, I did nothing. I went to work. I let Rosa Delgado file what she needed to file and let the court appoint what it needed to appoint. And I did not call Gerald. And I did not warn Claire's mother. And I did not give Trevor the satisfaction of a fight he could film. What I did do was drive out to see Eli, the way I do every Sunday. He lives in a place 90 minutes up the highway. A good place. The kind Pop's money was supposed to make sure he never had to leave. We sat in the common room, and I brought him a plate of the things he likes, and he told me the same story he always tells me, the one about the cowboy and the hat, and I laughed in the same spot I always laugh. ELI. Is Pop coming Sunday? He asks me that sometimes. He knows the answer, and he asks anyway, because asking keeps the cowboy a little closer, and I have never once told him not to. Not this Sunday, buddy, I said. Eli. He sat with me at the little table. The big people had the big table. Eli smiled, the way he smiles at the joke he loves. Pop liked the little table better. He said it had the best seats. I had to look at the window for a moment before I could answer him, because my brother had just told me, without knowing he was telling me anything, the exact reason I was about to take a family apart in their own dining room. Pop had sat at the children's folding table in the hallway by choice, year after year, with the parked-away boy nobody counted, and he had called it the best seat in the house, and somewhere in a county 60 miles away, a man with a clipboard had decided that a person who would do that did not deserve to say where his own money went. Yeah, I said. He did, buddy. He liked the little table best. I drove home, and I did not cry until I was on the highway, and then I let myself once, and then I put it away, because a man who is about to do a careful thing cannot do it with wet hands. The cracks started in Trevor first, because Trevor is the kind of man who can only stay golden as long as no one checks the math. He called me. He never called me. In 9 years he had called me twice, both times to ask me to pick something up. This time he opened with my name, which was new.
Daniel, hey, listen. Heard Pop's lawyer's been making some noise. You know anything about that?
I know she's Pop's lawyer, I said.
Right, but, you didn't talk to her, did you? Because Dad's just trying to keep this simple, keep it in the family, and the last thing anybody needs is some outside lawyer turning a private thing into a whole, you get me.
I get you, I said.
Good, good. Because it's nothing, man, it's a paperwork thing. Pop wanted Dad to run the estate. End of story. He was talking too much. The way he had goaded the room too much. A man who fills silence because silence has started to sound like a verdict. You'd tell me, right? If somebody came to you. We're family.
Are we? I said.
Come on, don't do that. The laugh again, thinner. Look, between us, there's a video going around, that Thanksgiving thing. Me filming you carving. It was a joke, you know it was a joke.
I was at the kids' table in the hallway, Trevor. You stood over me and filmed me clearing your plates, and you captioned it for the whole family to laugh at. Which part was the joke, me or the table?
Okay, look, that's not what this is about. His voice climbed. Somebody could take that video the wrong way, like we were being weird about the estate stuff. The timing's bad, man. So if anybody asks, that thing doesn't really say anything, right? It's just a dumb family video.
And there it was. The funny video Trevor had shot of me at the children's folding table, the one he had posted with a laughing caption for the whole family to enjoy, had a date stamped on it. A November date. The same November, Gerald stood at the head of the table and announced the estate would be handled within the family. Trevor had filmed the exact dinner where his father declared, on the record, an intent that the paperwork said had already been settled 8 months before, in March, by a signature that could not exist. Trevor had handed me a second clock. He had time-stamped his own father's announcement, and he had posted it himself, and now he was on the phone asking me to help him pretend the clock said nothing. Trevor, I said, don't delete it. The pause on his end was the sound of a golden sun understanding, for the first time in his life, that the furniture had been counting.
Why would I delete it? He said too quickly. There's nothing to delete.
Good, I said. Then we agree. And I hung up, and I did not feel like a man who'd won anything. I felt like a man who had finally stopped guessing. The dates were laid beside each other on my kitchen table, and the truth had been on that recorder the whole time, the day and the hour stamped in the corner of every file, waiting for me to sit down and read them in order. 3 weeks later, the notices went out. Not from me, from the court. Rosa Delgado had filed to challenge Gerald's standing as executor, and the court had done the thing I had been told it might do, the thing the Whitmans had never once imagined could reach into their dining room. It had appointed an independent document examiner, a man named Okafor, court-appointed, beholden to no one at that table, to compare the dated audio against the in-laws' Pop signed this himself paperwork. And it had scheduled the hearing on a motion Delgado had quietly engineered to take depositions at the Whitman house in the long dining room in front of the family on the Sunday after Thanksgiving. Gerald, I am told, fought to move it. He wanted a courthouse, a closed room, lawyers, and no relatives. He did not get it, because Delgado had argued that the witnesses to Pop's last years were the family themselves, and a judge had agreed, and so the reckoning was going to happen in the exact room where it began. The same dining room, the same long table, the same head seat where Gerald had raised 9 years of glasses and called me the help. I want to tell you something about the morning of it, because it is the last quiet thing in this story before the noise. Claire and I drove over together, and for once I was not bringing a turkey to carve. The folding table was still in the hallway by the kitchen where it always was. Somebody had set it up out of habit. My seat, waiting for me, the way it had waited for 9 years. I did not sit at it this time. I walked past it, into the dining room, and I took a chair at the long table, an ordinary chair, no one's chair, and I set the bag down beside me, and I waited. Gerald came in last, the way the head of a table always does. He saw me at his table, and his face did the thing I had been watching it do for 9 years, the small tightening, the look that said, "You don't have a name here." But there was something under it now that had not been there before, and I recognized it because I had worn it myself for 9 Thanksgivings. He was afraid of the room.
"Daniel," he said, "I don't know what you think this is, but this is a family matter, and you've never understood that, because you've never been family."
"Then I'll just listen," I said. "I'm good at that. You've all said so."
"Get up from my table."
"It's not your table today, Gerald. The court set the room. I just took a chair." His jaw worked. Claire's mother hovered behind him, and Trevor stood by the window with his phone in his hand, and for once, nothing to film, because he had finally understood that a camera is a clock, and a clock was the last thing in the world his family needed running.
"Whatever that woman told you," Gerald said, "lower now, just for me. She's chasing a fee. Walter wanted me to handle things. He signed. I have the paper. You have a grudge and a recorder, and everybody in this room knows what you are."
"What am I?" I said.
"The help. You married my daughter, and you've spent 9 years acting like that bought you a name."
"Pop bought me a name," I said. "He used it on a recording dated March 11th. You should remember March 11th, Gerald. You've got a paper that says you were watching him sign." The color drained from his face from the forehead down, fast, the way a wall loses its light when a cloud crosses the sun.
"Be careful, son."
"Don't," I said. "You don't get that word. There was exactly one man at this table who got to call me that, and you put him in a chair in the hallway next to my brother for years." The court's people came in then, a clerk, a stenographer, and last of all a tall man with a black case who set it on the sideboard and said good morning to the room in the flat, unimpressed voice of a person who has read 1,000 signatures and been moved by none of them. Examiner Okafor. He did not look at me, and he did not look at Gerald. He looked at the case. And then Rosa Delgado stood up from her chair at the foot of the long table, in the dining room where Gerald Whitman had been the only one allowed to stand, and she buttoned her jacket, and she set a single sealed envelope on the table in front of her. Pop's witnessed letter, the original, the one she had kept in custody for 2 years. And she said, in a voice that carried all the way to the children's folding table empty in the hallway,
"What hope do you have against me? Before anyone touches a plate today, the examiner is going to read 2 dates aloud, and then we're going to listen to Mr. Whitman tell you, in his own voice, what he asked me to keep until exactly this moment."
Gerald's hand came down flat on the table.
Now wait.
Examiner Okafor, Delgado said, and she did not raise her voice. The file.
And Okafor reached for the black case, and the room went so quiet I could hear the furnace tick in the wall, and the latch of the case came up under his thumb. Nobody at that table had moved. Rosa Delgado stood near the end of the long dining room with a flat brown folder against her chest, and the man beside her, gray suit, court ID on a lanyard, a black case at his feet, bent down and unzipped it without hurry. There was no turkey on the table this Sunday, and no plate in my hands to clear. The court had set the room, and the long cloth held files and a stenographer's machine instead of a meal. And for the first time across 9 Thanksgivings and the empty seat where the 10th would have been, the head of that table had nothing to say. Gerald found his voice the way a man finds a railing in the dark. He reached for the thing that had always worked.
Rosa, this is a holiday. Whatever paperwork you think you have, it can wait until Monday, in an office, like grown people.
What hope do you have against me? It could have. You chose to read Pop's estate in this room, at this table, in front of your guests, so we'll do it here.
She did not raise her voice. She set the folder down on the white cloth, square to the edge, the way you set down something you have carried a long way. The man in the gray suit straightened, a single sheet of paper in a clear sleeve in one hand and a small recorder in the other. My recorder, the same handheld unit Gerald had pushed across this table at me 9 years running. Go fetch the camera. Get the toast. I had handed it to Delgado 4 days ago. I had not seen it since.
My name is Emeka Okafor. I was appointed by the probate court to examine the instruments offered in the estate of Walter Whitman. I'm going to read 2 dates. I'd ask everyone to listen, because the rest of this turns on them.
Trevor laughed. It came out of him by reflex, the laugh he used to fill any silence that did not belong to him, the same laugh he had aimed down the hallway at me on Thanksgiving while his phone filmed me carving. Nobody laughed with him today. The sound died against the wallpaper, and he set down the glass of water in front of him.
Who let her in? Dad, who let the lawyer in?
Sit down, Trevor.
Okafor took the sheet in the clear sleeve and turned it, slowly, until it faced the length of the table, until the date at the bottom faced the family instead of him. I knew the document. I had photographed it this spring on the kitchen counter in the gray light of the morning after Pop's funeral, before anyone in this family was awake. A power of estate instrument, Gerald named executor. A line at the bottom in handwriting that leaned the way Pop's hand had leaned, and a date beside it. Okafor laid one finger flat beside the date and left it there.
March 11th. That is the execution date on the instrument that names Gerald Whitman as executor of this estate. The signature is offered as Walter Whitman's. The family's sworn position, filed with the court, is that he signed it himself in his own home on that day.
Gerald's jaw worked once. He had said exactly that to the court, in writing. He had sworn it. He looked at the sheet, and then, for half a second, he looked at me. The first time all night he had looked at me as a person and not a chore. And I watched him try to remember what I might have been holding for 9 years while he closed doors behind me. Okafor reached into the open case and set the recorder on the white cloth, square beside the sheet, the scarred black unit Gerald had pushed across this table at me 9 years running. He set it down with no more weight than a man setting down a salt shaker. Then he put one finger on each, the paper, the recorder, like a man marking 2 points on a map.
This carries a device timestamp. The device clock was verified against the cellular network it synced to that week. The recording on it was made on March 11th, the same day, the same afternoon.
The room understood that something was about to happen, but not yet what. Claire, 2 seats down from her father, had gone very still. She had spent 9 years telling me that's just how Dad is. She had retrieved the family group thread for me herself 4 nights ago with shaking hands, telling me right up until she pressed send that she was sure there'd be an explanation. I watched her watch the black case. I watched her stop being sure.
I'm going to play 11 seconds. The timestamp puts it at 4:40 in the afternoon, March 11th.
He pressed a key on my recorder, and Pop's voice came into the dining room. It was the warm, slow voice I had heard call me son across this exact table while everyone else called me the help. It was the voice that had told me, under the bare trees at the orchard an hour north with Eli's hand in his, that he was leaving something safe for Eli and that I was to keep the recorder no matter what anyone said. It filled the room the way it had always filled a room, and every person at that table who had loved him and every person who had used him heard it at the same time. On the recording, Pop said, "You hear me, Daniel? I told Gerald no this morning, and I'm still not signing it. Not for Eli's share, not for any of it. Eli's part is set the way I want it. You're the one who keeps this safe." 11 seconds. Then Okafor lifted his thumb, and the room was quiet again. And the quiet was a different material than it had been a minute before. Here is the thing about a recording that nobody can argue with. A signature can be defended. A man can say his hand was tired, his memory was off, the notary stepped out. But a date is a small machine, and a clock is a small machine. And when you set them side by side, they do not negotiate.
The document says Walter Whitman signed it on March 11th. The recording made on March 11th is Walter Whitman refusing to sign it. Both cannot be true. The court does not require both to be true. It requires one.
Gerald stood up.
That recording is doctored. He's had that thing for years. He could have stitched anything together, spliced an old word here, an old word there. My father's not here to say what he did or didn't say, and this man knows it. He married into this family on a debt he never paid, and now he's standing in my dining room trying to—
Mr. Whitman, I examined the file before I came. There are no edit boundaries in the audio. The timestamp is continuous and matches the network log. And it is not the only recording.
That stopped him, not the accusation, the plural. Delgado opened the brown folder then, and she did it slowly, and I think she did it slowly on purpose, because there are moments that should not be rushed, even when you have waited 7 months for them. She laid out photographs across the white cloth, one beside the next, like a man dealing a hand he already knows wins.
What hope do you have against me? These are dated photographs Daniel took of documents that were left on this kitchen counter, where he was always sent to clear. He photographed them the way another man might dust a windowsill, out of habit, because nobody watched him.
I want to tell you about being the man nobody watches. For 9 years it was the wound. It was the proof I did not belong, the seat in the hallway, the recorder pushed into my hands so I would disappear into the kitchen and miss the part where the family talked. And somewhere in those 9 years, it stopped being a wound and became a window. They closed the doors. They did not check whether the help had cleared the room. They left papers on the counter where they sent me to scrape plates. And I photographed them every time with the date burned into the corner of the frame. And I told no one. Not because I was building a case. I didn't know there would ever be a case. I did it because Pop told me, that day at the orchard, to keep everything, and Pop was the only one who had ever told me I was worth keeping anything for. Okafor walked the table through the photographs without a single flourish. He is a person who deals only in what can be checked.
This counter document is dated the 9th of March. It is a draft of the same executor instrument, unsigned, with 2 clauses crossed out in a hand that is not Walter Whitman's. This one, dated the 12th of March, the day after the recording, is the same instrument, now bearing a signature, now dated the 11th. The signature was added to a document that, 24 hours earlier, did not have one, and was then backdated to the day the recording proves he refused.
Trevor made a sound. I think he meant it to be words.
Okay, but that's not even. You can't just...
There's also your video.
The room turned to Trevor the way a field of grass turns in a wind.
You filmed in this house on Thanksgiving. You filmed Daniel carving at the folding table in the hallway, while your father told the room the estate would be handled within the family. Your phone stamps the time and the location, and so does the platform you uploaded part of it to. Your own footage puts that declaration of intent in November, 8 months after a signature your family swears settled the same estate in March. You provided a clock, Mr. Whitman. You thought you were providing a punchline.
Trevor looked at his father. His father did not look back. That, more than anything Okafor read aloud, was the moment I understood the thing was over. The golden sun looked to the head of the table for the rescue that had always come, and the head of the table had gone somewhere else inside himself, somewhere accounting for losses. Delgado stayed standing. She had not come to gloat. She had come because a man she had worked for, a man she had liked, had asked her to.
What hope do you have against me? I want to be exact about what Pop's intent was, because it has been buried under a year of paper. Walter Whitman left a witnessed letter and a sealed, recorded statement. He gave them to Daniel, not to his son, not to his grandson, to the in-law you seated in the hallway. He did that on purpose. The letter and the statement say one thing, plainly. What hope do you have against me? His estate was to fund a protected trust for Daniel's younger brother Eli, who Pop loved and who Pop visited when no one in this family would, and the remainder was to be split with a full and equal accounting among his heirs. That is all. That is the whole of what he wanted.
Eli. They had never let me bring him here. 9 years of holidays, and the disabled brother of the help was, in Gerald's word, not blood here either, and so Eli spent every Thanksgiving at home with a neighbor while I carved a bird I wasn't allowed to eat. Pop drove out to see Eli twice a month. Pop brought him a radio one Christmas and sat on the floor of Eli's room and listened to a ball game with him until dark. Pop, the man this table used and outvoted and pressured, was the one human being in this bloodline who looked at my brother and saw a person worth providing for. And Gerald had taken it. That was the part I had not let myself say out loud, not even to Claire, until Okafor said it for me in a flat court voice over a Thanksgiving table.
The executed instrument does not fund the trust for Eli Hayes. It routes the provision Walter Whitman set aside for Eli into accounts held by Gerald Whitman's own children, including yours. Mr. Whitman, he did not look up from the page when he said it to Trevor. The provision for a disabled man was redirected to people who were already named in the will for a clean and adequate share of their own.
That is the sentence I keep, not because it is clever, because it is the truth of him. Gerald Whitman had a share. He had a good share, an honest share, the share a father leaves to children he raised. He looked at that, and he looked at the smaller things set aside for a man who could not defend it, and he chose to take the smaller thing too. There was no need in it, nothing pushing him. He took it for the plain reason that Eli could not stop him, and because he had spent 9 years teaching this room that the people in the hallway do not have names. I had asked myself for 7 months why a man with enough would reach for the little that wasn't his. I don't have a tidy answer, and I am not going to invent one to make you feel better. The closest I came was watching him at that table while Okafor read, and seeing that to Gerald the money was never the point. The point was that the money proved who counted. Eli didn't count. I didn't count. Taking what was set aside for us was just the paperwork of a thing he already believed. Pop's provision was supposed to go to my brother Eli. It went to the men who filmed me carving. I have asked myself what to call that, and I have stopped trying to find a word that fits on a sign. I just call it what happened. Okafor closed the case. He turned to Delgado, and Delgado turned to the room, and what came next was not shouting. It was procedure, which is a colder thing and a heavier one.
What hope do you have against me? I'll be filing first thing in the morning, but I want it said out loud here, in the room where the will was going to be read, so no one in this family can pretend later that they didn't hear it. What hope do you have against me? The court will be asked to remove Gerald Whitman as executor for cause. The diverted assets will be traced and clawed back. Every dollar of them goes into a protected trust for Eli Hayes, the way Pop wrote it, not to Daniel. What hope do you have against me? Daniel asked me, twice, to make sure none of it comes to him. It does not. It goes to his brother.
I had asked her that, twice. Because I knew this room, and I knew that the moment money touched my name, they would have a way to call me what they had always called me: the renter, the charity case, the boy who married up and finally found his angle. So I made sure there was no angle to find. I took nothing, I have taken nothing. The folding table cost me 9 years, and I would not take $1 off it.
And the forensic findings, the backdating, the added signature, the false sworn statement to the court, will be referred to the district attorney. Gerald Whitman and Trevor Whitman will be named in that referral. I want to be precise, because people in rooms like this always hear what they fear, instead of what's said. No one is going anywhere tonight. Nothing has been decided. A referral is a beginning, but it is a real one, and it has both your names on it.
Charge is pending. Referred, not concluded. I have learned to say it the careful way, the true way, because the careful way is the way that holds. Nobody was led off in handcuffs from that dining room. What happened was smaller and larger than that. A line had been drawn under a number, and the number was no longer his. And then Delgado said the thing that turned the whole night sideways, the thing I had not known until she said it, the thing that took my private 9-year wound and showed me it was never mine alone.
What hope do you have against me? There's one more matter, and it's the reason I asked the examiner to bring the full file. Daniel gave us 9 years of recordings. He thought he was giving us one March afternoon. He gave us more than that.
She laid a second set of photographs over the first. Different years, different holidays, the same handwriting that leaned like Pop's, the same crossed-out clauses, the same gap of a day or two between a draft with no signature and a final with one. A rhythm. Once you have seen a rhythm, you cannot unsee it, and the table was looking at 9 years of the same 2 days over and over, like a song with one verse.
The method repeats. The recordings and the dated drafts establish a pattern across at least 9 years and across more than one estate. The same sequence appears each time. A relative is isolated. A document is drafted. A holiday is chosen, because at a holiday a person is surrounded and tired and unwilling to make a scene. Pressure is applied. A signature is added after the fact, and the document is dated to a day the person was present, but did not consent.
What hope do you have against me? It happened to Pop on the 11th of March, the day he refused on that recording, and on at least 2 holidays before that, which his own voice describes on other clips Daniel kept. It happened years earlier to Gerald's daughter, Nadine.
Nobody at that table had said Nadine's name in years. She was the cautionary tale, the ungrateful one, the daughter who walked out and never came back and proved you couldn't help some people. I had heard the story a dozen times across this very cloth. I had never once heard the part where she was seated the year before she left at a folding table in a hallway while the family ate, and asked to sign something, and shamed quiet when she balked, and then cut off when she would not sign at all.
What hope do you have against me? Nadine was moved off the dining table the Thanksgiving before her share was reassigned. There is a recording of it. Daniel had it the whole time and didn't know what it was, and it happened to a cousin, Mark, whose inheritance from his grandmother was rerouted through the same kind of backdated instrument in the same hand 2 years ago.
4 people. I had carried the recorder for 9 years, thinking the worst it held was my own humiliation. It held 4 people's: an estranged daughter, a cousin, Pop himself, pressured across more than one holiday, refusing on at least one of them in a voice warm enough to break your chest, and me, in the hallway, a witness who didn't know he was a witness, holding the device that was quietly recording the same crime committed 4 times in the same room with the same 2 days of paperwork. 9 years of toasts. I had thought of them as 9 years of being made small. They were 9 years of a man running the identical play and trusting that the help in the hallway would never understand what he was watching. The seat of my exile was the best seat in the house for seeing exactly how it was done. Claire was crying without any sound. She was looking at the second row of photographs, at Nadine's year, the sister she had been taught to be ashamed of, and I watched something rearrange itself behind her eyes, the whole architecture of a childhood being quietly reshelved. She had defended him for 9 years. That's just how Dad is. She had said it to me in our kitchen, in our bed, in this house. She put her hand over her mouth, and she did not take her father's side. And after 9 years, that was the loudest thing she could have done.
Daddy. It came out of her small, the word a grown woman uses when she is briefly 7. Daddy, tell her it isn't true. Tell her the dates are wrong. Tell her.
Gerald did not tell her the dates were wrong. He could not. The dates were the one thing in that room that did not care who he was. And he was a man who had spent his whole life being someone whose word changed the dates. He looked at his daughter, and whatever was left of the father who had raised her reached for an explanation and found the same empty air Trevor had found.
Claire, sweetheart, you don't understand how estates work. There are things that have to be managed. For the family. For all of you. He's turned you against.
He's not the one who put Nadine at the kids' table. You did. I was there. I was 9, and I thought it was funny because you laughed, so I laughed. Her voice cracked all the way through. You made me think it was funny.
That was the end of the table, really. Not the referral, not the clawback, not even Pop's voice. It was a daughter saying, "I laughed because you laughed," and hearing, for the first time in her own ears, what she had been laughing at. The big table had run on that exact engine for 9 years. Gerald raised his glass and everyone laughed, and the laugh told the man in the hallway he was nothing. The engine only worked as long as the room kept laughing. Claire had just stopped, and one by one, around that cloth, I watched the others stop too. Gerald looked for the room that had always backed him. An aunt studied her plate. A cousin found something fascinating in the grain of the table. Trevor, his own name now sitting in a referral beside his father's, had gone the color of the tablecloth and was no use to anyone. The head of the table looked up the length of it for his court and found a room full of people doing the thing he had taught them to do to other people, looking away. Okafor and Delgado did not stay for the rest. They had said what the law needed said in front of witnesses, and they gathered their files, and Delgado stopped beside my chair on the way out, beside the folding chair in the hallway, because I had carried it back to the head of the room to stand while the dates were read, and then I had quietly carried it back to the hallway, because the hallway was where I could see Eli's empty place at the kitchen door.
What hope do you have against me? He asked me to make sure you got the last clip, the sealed one. He said you'd know when. She set the recorder in my hand, the same scarred plastic unit Gerald had pushed across the table at me for 9 years. It's cued to the end. Pop said it was for you, not for the court. I didn't listen to it. He told me not to, and I do what my clients tell me when they're gone, same as when they're here.
Then she left, and the examiner left, and the room that had laughed at me for 9 years sat in the wreckage of a holiday it would tell wrong for the rest of its life, and I did not say one word to any of them. I want you to understand that. I had 9 years of words. I had a speech I had built carving turkeys I wasn't allowed to eat. I said none of it. There was nothing left at that table worth the breath. Gerald did not get walked out in handcuffs. The true version is quieter, and it lands harder. He was asked, by his own sister, in a voice I had never heard her use, to please just go, Gerald, please. And he stood, and he buttoned a jacket that no longer meant what it had meant an hour before, and he walked the length of his own dining room toward the door. The path to the door runs past the kitchen, past the hallway, past the children's folding table where, for 9 Thanksgivings, he had sat me down and handed me a recorder so I would disappear. He had to pass it to leave. I was standing near it. He slowed, just slightly, the way you slow at a thing you recognize, and for 1 second the head of the table and the help stood level beside the folding table in the hallway, and neither of us was at the big table anymore. He didn't call me a name. He had run out of them. He looked at the folding table and at the recorder in my hand, and I watched him finally do the arithmetic he had skipped for 9 years, that the man he sat in the hallway to make small was the man he had handed the proof to, year after year, with his own hand, because making me invisible had felt too good to question. Then he left. The head seat at the long table was empty. It stayed empty. Nobody moved up to take it. I think they were afraid of it. Claire found me in the kitchen while the rest of them were still deciding whether to pretend this was a thing they could eat through. I was making up the plate. She stood in the doorway her father had walked through 100 times, and she watched my hands a while before she said anything.
You knew. For how long did you know?
I knew Pop made the recording. I didn't know what the dates would say until Okafor put them side by side. The rest of it, Nadine, Mark, I found that out in there, same as you.
9 years, Daniel. 9 years I sat at that table and let him send you down the hall. I told you it was just him being him. I told myself it was nothing. Her voice went thin. Why didn't you ever make me look at it?
Because I needed you to choose it. If I dragged you to it, your father would have had a way to say I turned you. Tonight you turned yourself. Nobody can take that back from you now.
I'm not going after him. I want you to know that. I'm not going to call lawyers and try to soften it. She wiped her face with the back of her wrist, the way she did as a girl in the photos I'd seen. He did it to Nadine. He did it to your brother. I'm done deciding it was nothing.
I told her the funds were going to Eli and only to Eli, that I'd asked Delgado twice to keep my name off every dollar of it. She nodded like that was the one thing in the whole night that made sense to her. Then she asked the question I think she'd been carrying since Pop's voice came off that recorder in the dining room.
Can I meet him, Eli? I've been married to you 9 years and I've never met your brother, because I let this family tell me he wasn't ours to know. Can I meet him?
Yeah, I said, but not tonight. Tonight's his and mine. Come Sunday. I did not go back to the big table. People expect that part. They expect the wronged man to walk up the length of the room and finally sit in the good seat, claim the chair, eat off the real plates. I have thought about why I didn't, and the honest answer is that I never wanted the big table. I wanted my brother to have what Pop left him. I wanted Pop's voice to be heard saying I'm not signing in the room that pretended he had. Both of those things had happened. The big table had nothing on it I needed. What I needed was in the kitchen, in a plate I made up with my own hands while the family I was no longer part of gathered their coats. White meat, the way Eli likes it, no skin, a scoop of the potatoes, 2 rolls because he always wants 2 and is always too polite to take the second until you put it on the plate yourself. I carved the turkey one more time that night in the empty kitchen, and this time I carved it for the one person that bird had never been meant for, and I did not ask anyone's permission, and no one handed me a recorder to make me disappear. I drove the 90 minutes to Eli's place. Eli was up because he waits up on holidays even when there's nowhere for him to go, sitting by the radio Pop gave him with the volume low. He has had that radio 9 years. He keeps it on Pop's old station out of a loyalty he could not explain to you and does not need to. I set up the folding table in his room. They keep one down the hall. It is the cheap aluminum kind, the kind that lives in a closet between the holidays, the exact kind that lived in the Whitman hallway and held my plate for 9 years. I had hated those tables with a heat I never told anyone about. I set it up in the middle of the room, square to nothing, and I put the plate down in front of my brother, and I put my own plate across from him, and I sat. Ely. Is this the good turkey? He asks it every year. Every year I have come home from that house and told him the turkey was fine, it was a nice dinner, everyone says hi, and none of it was true, and all of it was to keep the hallway out of our front room. This year I told him the truth, because for the first time the truth was a thing a brother could hand across a table like a roll. It's the good turkey, Eli. I carved it myself. It's yours. And then I took the recorder out of my coat, the scarred plastic unit, cued to the end. The sealed clip Delgado said Pop made for me, and not for the court. I had not let myself play it in that house. It would have been wrong to let those people hear it. This was not theirs. I set the recorder on the folding table between our two plates, and I pressed the key, and Pop came into our front room the way he had come into that dining room. Except this time there was no examiner, no date, no court. Just a dead man and the two brothers he was the only one to love. Pop's voice was tired on that last clip, and slow, but it was his. All the warmth still in it, recorded some evening when the house was quiet, and he had decided to say the thing out loud while he still could. On the recording, Pop said, "Daniel, if you're hearing this, then the rest of it came out, and I'm sorry I left you to carry it, but you were the only one strong enough to hold it, and gentle enough not to use it wrong. Take care of your brother. The money's for Eli, all of it, you hear me? You don't keep a dime, you'll want to give it to him anyway, I know you. You're a good man. You were always the best one at that table, and don't let them tell you any different because they sat you in the hallway because they were afraid of you, not because you were less. You were more. You were always more." A pause and a breath, and the warm, slow voice that 9 years of Thanksgivings could not take from me. "Good night, son." Son. The clip ended there. It did not loop. Pop only said it once, the way he only ever said it once a year at that table, under his breath so Gerald wouldn't hear. The single word the whole rest of the room spent 9 Thanksgivings making sure I would never feel I'd earned. Eli was eating. He did not understand all of it, and he did not need to. He understood that Pop was on the radio, that's how he said it, Pop's on the radio, and that the turkey was good, and that his brother was sitting across from him at the table instead of 40 minutes away, carving for people whose names Eli never learned because I never let those names in our door. Eli. Can we do it like this next year? Yeah, we can do it like this every year. 9 years they handed me the recorder so I'd disappear. Pop's voice was on it the whole time. I carry a plate down the hall, and Eli and I sit at the folding table because we want to. The head seat is empty. The funds are in the trust now, every clawed-back dollar of them, in Eli's name and only Eli's name, and they will pay for the kind of care that lets a man keep his own radio in his own room for the rest of his life. I took nothing. I told you I wouldn't, and I didn't. The referral has both their names on it, and it is moving the slow, careful way those things move. And I am not going to tell you it ended in a cell because it hasn't, and it might not, and I have made my peace with the difference between a beginning and a verdict. I keep the recorder in the kitchen drawer now, the one with the spare keys and the dead batteries, where a thing lives when you no longer need it but can't put it down. The folding table stays up in the front room year-round. I don't fold it away between holidays anymore. It turned out to be the only table in my life that was ever actually mine. I sat my brother at the kids' table for 9 years, too, by letting that house tell me where he belonged. I won't do it again. He's at the big table now, the only big table that counts. And it's a folding one, and there's a plate in front of him I carved myself. If a room had laughed at your brother for 9 years and called it grace, and you finally got to hand him the good turkey at a table you chose, would you have walked back up to the big seat that was finally empty? Or would you have stayed in the hallway, where the only voice that ever called you son was waiting on a scarred plastic recorder, saying it one last time? I know which one I did. The head seat is still empty. I hope it stays that way. Until next time.